Welcome to another episode of Pick 3 DST, where I give you 3 defenses I like, 1 defense I'm fading, and 1 defense I'm stashing ahead of week 2 of the NFL season. The stash pick, which will come at the end of this video, is new this season. It was suggested to me on Twitter, so make sure you reach out to me with any questions or any ideas you have. We can get them into the show. As a reminder, these are not my full weekly DST rankings. If you want to check those out, you can click the link below, which will take you to the article, which I'll update as the week goes on when we get weather information and injury updates and things of that nature. As always, we're going to start with our accountability check for what was an average showing in week number 1. My top-ranked defense was the Denver Broncos, and they finished as the top-ranked defense on the week. I also had the Seahawks as my sleeper defense. They finished with 8 fantasy points, which was good for being the 10th-ranked defense of the week. However, I did fade the 49ers, and they had 9 points in that same exact game, so that was a miss. And then the Cardinals, which was my solid defense of the week, had a pretty mediocre 5 points in a plus matchup against the New Orleans Saints. So we will hope for a better showing here in week 2. My sleeper defense for the week is the Dallas Cowboys. Consensus has them down at 13th, but they are my 4th-ranked defense of the week. Now, we know this Cowboys unit is not going to be as dynamic as it was when they had Micah Parsons. However, they had a pretty strong showing against a good Eagles offense in week number 1, and they pressured Jalen Hurts on 42% of his dropbacks, which was the 3rd most that any quarterback got pressured in week 1. They finished ranked 7th in PFF's pass rush productivity rate, and that's something that really entices me now that they're going up against the New York Giants, because the Giants allowed Russell Wilson to get pressured on over 40% of his dropbacks in week number 1. It's possible the Giants are going to be without left tackle Andrew Thomas again. If Thomas were to play, I might bump the Cowboys down a couple of spots, but I still see them as a top 10 option this week and think that they are going to be able to get after a pretty mediocre Giants offense. My solid defense of the week is the Baltimore Ravens. Consensus has them at 4th, and I have them at 5th on the week. Now, I wanted to highlight the Ravens because I think they're a really good example of taking what we saw in week number 1, but not overvaluing and abandoning our priors after just 1 week. The Ravens looked really good for 3 quarters of football on Sunday night, and I really liked them as a defense coming into the season. Yes, they had an epic collapse in the 4th quarter. Josh Allen threw for over 250 yards, and the Ravens lost that game. But I am not going to let 1 quarter of football against the reigning NFL MVP make me change my tune on this Ravens defense overall. They get a pretty good matchup against the Browns this week, a Browns offense that made a Bengals defense look pretty average, and that Bengals defense was bad last year. Joe Flacco is not Josh Allen. I know the Browns are going to have Quinshaw Judkins, though we're not sure that he's going to play this week. And even if he does play this week, he missed the entire offseason. He wasn't at camp, so how much are the Browns really going to put on his plate? I'm not sure that Jerry Jeudy is a true NFL number 1 wide receiver. I do like the Browns' 2 tight ends, but the Ravens' defense is littered with playmakers. I think after that loss against the Bills, they're going to come out to make a statement and take it out on the Browns, so I expect a solid showing from this Ravens defense this week. Before we continue, pause this video, comment below, let me know which defense you are starting this week, or ask me any start-sit questions, and I'll get to those as the week goes on. My stud defense for this week is the Los Angeles Rams. Consensus has them at 2nd, and I have them at 3rd on the week. We had the Rams as a top 10 unit last week, and they finished 3rd with 11 fantasy points in week number 1, so we're more than happy to roll them out there again. I do like some of the players on this Titans offense, Cam Ward, Calvin Ridley, to a lesser extent, Tony Pollard and Chigo Okonkwo, but it's pretty barren behind those guys, and none of those 4 guys is really able to take over an NFL game right now. Plus, this Titans offensive line allowed Cam Ward to get sacked 6 times against the Broncos last week, and Cam Ward faced pressure more than any other quarterback in the NFL in week number 1. I know the Broncos have a really great defense, but the Rams have a really solid pass rush as well. They pressured C.J. Stroud on 41% of his dropbacks in week number 1, so I expect them to be in Cam Ward's face all game long, and that should lead to fantasy goodness. The defense I'm fading for week number 2 is the Philadelphia Eagles. Consensus has them up at 5th, but I have them down at 16th on the week. Now, I know the Eagles had to play week number 1 without arguably their best defensive player, Jalen Carter, since he decided to spit on Dak Prescott before the game got started. However, this Eagles defense also lost a lot of other talented playmakers in the offseason, and so I'm not really sure what level of production we're going to get out of them. They looked mediocre in week number 1 against the Dallas Cowboys offense that I think is just slightly above average, so I'm not really excited to play the Eagles this week against the Chiefs. And I know the really high consensus ranking is because the Chiefs are going to be playing without both Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy after Worthy suffered a shoulder injury in week number 1. However, we've yet to really see Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes be an offense that we want to target. We know they're going to come into this game with a solid attack plan. We know that they're going to move the ball down the field. Even if they don't put up a lot of points, they're not going to make tons of mistakes. Patrick Mahomes is not going to give up a lot of sacks. And so I think this is a game where the Eagles probably score 5 fantasy points. And so I'd rather chase higher upside defenses on the wire. Lastly, my stash play to get ahead of the waiver wire in week number 3 is the Kansas City Chiefs, who are rostered in just 16% of leagues right now, and that roster rate could go down ahead of this weekend's showing against the Eagles. However, they get the Giants in week number 3. We already talked earlier in this video about how the Giants are giving up tons of pressure, and they're an offense that we do want to attack with fantasy defenses. There's also a chance that the Chiefs come into this game 0-2 since they face the Eagles this week. And if the Chiefs are 0-2 going up against the Giants in what could be like kind of a must-win game for them, I expect them to really dial up the pressure, and I think that they're going to have a really great game against the Giants. Though we should just say this stash play is really for deeper leagues and leagues where you have some weird rules that maybe allow you to limit how many running backs and wide receivers you can roster. I would much rather roster an upside running back or wide receiver at this point than stash 2 defenses. But if you are in a league that allows you to stash 2 defenses or prioritizes stashing defenses, the Chiefs are my pick for week number 3. That's going to do it for this episode of Pick 3 DST. As a reminder, comment below, let me know which defense you're playing, or ask me any start-sit questions. I'll get to those as the week goes on. Like and subscribe to get this video and all of our football content and fantasy football content over at NBC Sports, and I'll check you next week for another episode of Pick 3 DST. Good luck on Sunday.